Our next speaker is David Lubitz. Now, there's a couple of really interesting things that I'll start with. Apparently, he got into mechanical, into engineering through the development of ultra-light aircrafts, homemade ones, apparently. And apparently, spent some of your time now developing submarines.
That was actually when I was a student.
Well, that was when you were a student. So anyway, a guy with some really interesting talent brings them to the University of Guelph in terms of the School of Engineering, where are you known as the wind guy?
The wind guy and sometimes also the renewable energy guy, so I get to wear a lot of hats.
Excellent. How many people do we have here from the School of Engineering? A few of your fans are here.
Wow.
This is great. A couple of other comments. PhD in Mechanical and Aeronautical Engineering from the University of California, and real interest and leadership in Guelph's wind engineering. So we're really glad to have you with us today. Look forward to your comments. That's all yours. Thank you.
So this is, essentially they posed these ideas to us, right? It was, the conference theme is sustainable cities, and, well, who are we kidding? Well, let's see if we're kidding or not. Maybe cities can be sustainable, maybe they can't. And then the two other thoughts here. So the ruins of the unsustainable are the challenge of the 21st century. Well, maybe ruins is a strong word, but the quote from Einstein there is actually pretty good. The significant problems we face now essentially can't be solved by thinking the same way we were when we made them. And I think there is an element of truth in that, especially as it applies to cities. And so I thought for 5 minutes I'd try and go through sort of why that is, or why we need to change how we think about essentially how we build cities. So more an engineer's perspective, like what actually is in place there, the systems, the infrastructure, and so forth. Well, first of all, why do we have cities? We started out historically a long time ago, rural, agrarian. People were very dispersed. Part of that was you had to supply your own food, your own water, the resources you need to live very close to where you were. We just weren't that mobile. But people have this innate sociability. We like to be closer together. And when you bring people closer together, you can accomplish things that you can't when you're sort of dispersed across the landscape. I think there's a natural inclination for people to cluster together, to essentially form into towns, cities. And essentially we see what happened was, historically, that happened to the degree that the technology allowed. So in the past, essentially everyone had to be involved in finding or producing food. We didn't have very large cities. As we got better, as fewer people could produce the food, anyone who could, who wasn't involved in that, tended to cluster into the cities. That creates some interesting challenges because, if you think of how we live now, the cities are probably less sustainable than a rural, dispersed lifestyle for a very supplying your basic needs sense. If you think of living out in the country, you have a water supply. Well, that water can come right from the well next to the house. And you can have a well next to the house because the nearest neighbors are a quarter of a mile away. Similarly, when you're done with that water, you flush the toilet, that's treated on site. It's a sewage treatment system, sewage treatment plant that's a septic tank or something like that. So the infrastructure is very short. It goes from this side of the house to that side of the house. Similarly, you can produce your own food to a great degree right around you. You can provide your own energy in the form of biomass, the woodlot, or other fuels. And even today, if you go out certain parts of the countryside out here, you can see the old order Mennonites, and I don't think 5 minutes is enough time to go into that, but they live a very sustainable way of life that is much more in tune with the environment. Well, there's a lot of community structure around that as well, so it's not that simple. We do have cities, and how do we end up building cities? Well, essentially, our cities got to their current state because we started solving, as problems came up, those immediate problems, we started solving them with immediate solutions we had available. And so, for example, as you get people together, so that even thousands of years ago, the first cities, you get too many people, you can't get enough water out of the river to supply enough water for all these people. So you build an aqueduct. You've built some infrastructure here. Now, the next problem is all these people are producing waste. Well, that contaminates the local city, the local environment. What do? Well, you build more infrastructure. You build pipes, you build sewers, you build other systems like that. Now, you get out of the city, the sewer drops it in the river. But it's going downstream to the next city. So as things evolve, we build sewage treatment plants. And then we still build water treatment plants in the next city because it's still not quite that good. So you go from essentially being able to provide water right away through a series of incremental improvements. So each one of these was, how do we fix this problem? Well, we build a pipe. How do we fix the problems that come up next? Well, we build a treatment plant. And that's how it works with water. That's how it works with other things in the city too. If you think of housing, we bring people together. They all need to live somewhere. Well, we want to make it better, so as the technology allows, we can fix up housing, we can improve it. Steel got better and more reliable about 100, 150 years ago, so we could build taller buildings. Glass became available. As technology like electricity came in, we could solve our air pollution problems. Because you bring all these people together, and all this air pollution is now generated when they burn coal or wood, when all the horses and the people. So we replace things with cleaner technologies, so to speak. But each one's an immediate fix. And I want to fix, say, my problem with my air pollution with all that coal smoke. Well, we can get natural gas, so we install that, or electricity. Well, we don't have that immediate problem with the coal smoke now. But we do have all this other infrastructure to bring in all this power. And we eventually get to a point where we have the cities we have today. And essentially, we're all living here in one spot. And the environment here in that spot cannot sustain us. So our city is this web of infrastructure and connections, equipment, resources, to bring in everything we need and then get rid of, sort of disperse back out all the things we produce. To sustain that, it takes resources, it takes material. We have to maintain all this stuff we've built. I live in a sort of a classic suburban house. I admit it. But if you think about that house, like the house is sitting there, okay, there's some wood in that house, there's some, the stuff it took to build the house. But there's a whole lot more. There's a water line coming into that house that runs under the street, that's under the entire street with lines to every house. Next to that, there's a sewer line that goes out of that house that connects up to all the other houses. And where my house, I think, conveys it about 10 miles to the sewage treatment plant. 1 minute? Oh man, okay. There's power lines, there's phone lines, there's essentially all these umbilicals. So that's sort of what we've got to. We've fixed a problem, often with technology, one at a time, and we've evolved to our current state. So, what's wrong with that? Well, if everything was staying the same, it would be fine. But we're coming up with newer and bigger problems. We're running out of resources. If you think of peak oil, it will happen. It is happening, or it will be happening soon. All that cheap energy is going to not be so cheap. Peak aluminum, peak copper, peak uranium, a lot of the metals and so forth follow the same thing. Materials are going to be harder to get. The cities that we've built are locked into needing a minimum amount of these resources per person. So we're really going to have to reimagine how they work. There's kind of a scary lesson. If you look at some of the cities in the developing world, we can sort of see our future. Because some of these cities don't have access to the energy and the materials and the resources per person. And you end up with city cores of a small number, very small amount of wealth, surrounded by sprawling slums of a lot of people living in very not good conditions. And as we run out of energy and resources, are we going to go that way too? Obviously, we don't want to do that. So we're going to have to reinvent these cities. But thinking about it the way we are, thinking about, okay, well, we'll find a problem. We'll fix our water problem with, we'll come up with a new way. We'll run a pipe over there, something like that. It's not going to cut it. We're going to have to think systems. We're going to have to do essentially an ecological approach. We're not going to solve it so that classic engineer way, sort of, I isolated one little thing, and I figured it out, and I fixed it. It's not going to work. We actually have to start now because, as Buckminster Fuller pointed out, there's a rate at which people can adapt to change. And it's difficult to do more than that. So, given the things that drive us, that we like to be sociable, that we like to live together, cities are not going to go away. But if we want them to be places where people want to live and thrive, we're really going to have to make sure that we start reinventing them now. And we really have to figure out how to do that in new ways. Thanks very much.